Hey, this is Marcus Washington, MTC Media. This is also going, I usually don't do this, but this is also going to double as a DMV dime, even though it's in our kind of like our culture section. Just simply because this one is personal to me, and I'm speaking from my perspective and from my heart. And I will start with this is that obviously, if you're watching the video version of this and not listening to the podcast, I am black. Um, I'm black and I grew up in Fauquier County, Virginia. For those who don't know where that is, get on 66 West, the 29 South, go through Gainesville, Virginia, keep going until you run into Warrenton. Um, but my experience growing up in Fauquier County in the late 70s and early 80s, being black, was not um, very joyous to say the least. To let you know about my family, I was one of three. Um, my mother was a stay home mom until I was in junior high school. My father was a manager at IBM. And they've been married, shoot, I wish I knew the exact years. They've been married for over 60 years. I tell you this is because for some of the mythical Black America, a term that I wholly hate, um, I'm not what people think of um, with my upbringing. You know, I was in both public and private school. In fact, my brother and I were two of only three black children in the private school we went to. You can imagine what it was like for me daily there in the early 80s and what that experience was. And I bring all of this up and I want you to know a little bit about me because it's pertinent to the next thing I wanted to speak about, which is this whole thing with Ralph Lauren's Oak Bluff collection. I am not the most fashionable person, as you probably know, because of the industry I was in before I started my own consulting firm. I was a federal contractor. I'm not going to say at what agencies, and there's a reason why I'm not going to say at what agencies. So I dressed in a particular way for that. And then you guys know I was high school basketball coach and coach on the Under Armour circuit. And I cover college basketball darn near full time. I can go on and on and on. So this is what you usually see me with. If you're listening on the podcast, it is a polo that is as bright orange can be. Um, so I really didn't pay attention to what Ralph Lauren was doing, and then I saw all these posts on social media with the thing that just makes me cringe, which is black people who have a monolithic outlook to the definition of being black. And it's always been bothersome to me because how I used to speak and how I wrote and the classes I was in, I was always, quote unquote, acting white. Despite the fact I was an athlete and all those other things that people think is black, I was acting white. I was the private school kid. The quick story about that, the reason why I have the nickname Mook. Where did the nickname Mook come from? 1985. Yes, I've had that nickname that long and I have not been able to outrun it. So after a while, I started to embrace it. But it was because kids were making fun of me. And these were all black kids making fun of me because how I speak or how I spoke. And I was the private school kid. And I was the kid with the white education. And I had a formal name of Marcus, and we can't call him Marcus. So Marcus went to Mucus. Mucus went to Mook. And all these years later, the nickname is 40 years later. The nickname never went away, and I hated the nickname because I knew what the origins of the nickname was. But this idea that in 2025 that black folks are still trying to define blackness and what blackness is and what blackness is not, socially, what it is economically, and all these things. I grew up in the country. I didn't grow up in the hood. We didn't have, 4 families, 7 people, and 3 bedrooms, or whatever other stereotypes people like to imagine. We didn't have, you know, these things that people associate with blackness, and that's everybody. I'm not just talking about white folks and people of other races. That's everyone. I grew up in a fiscally conservative household. I didn't grow up in a liberal household. I grew up in a fiscally conservative household. Which, when people would meet me, especially when I went to college at George Mason, of course I'm black. So you know what that means. Oh, you gotta be a raging liberal because you're black. It's like, hold on a second. Everything's not always that simple, right? So when this line went out and people started criticizing it, and look at this as dressing white, look at the things, the fashion and everything that goes with it. Now, can I wear it? No. One, probably, the people who are the models that's in it, that's modeling the clothes, I mean, they certainly have a different body shape than than I do. And it's kind of not my bag. But if there wasn't all this outrage and someone just sent this to me, I wouldn't have thought twice about the collection and the Martha Vineyards and collection and all these things, and this collab with some HBCUs and all of those. I mean, I would be like, yo, man, I could see some people really rocking this. I don't know if I could, and frankly, I don't know if I was the audience. And that's fine. That's with anything with fashion. But in 2025, and especially, and this is not to say this wouldn't have happened in other times, because I believe to a certain extent it would have. But in 2025, and kind of what 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue looks like and sounds like, everything is an act of activism. And it's just, you got to stop. You got to stop. I can understand if you say, hey, look, if I see someone in it, he look like a cornball, or whatever term people use these days. It's stuff that was said back when I was growing up too. If you wore a certain type of clothes, maybe kind of look corny or whatever the case may be. But to associate it with the black experience, when we don't all have the same experience. We don't all think the same. We didn't all have the same upbringing. We didn't have all the same core principles and what drove us as a family. And within family, it might be 4 or 5 different ways of the way people did things. I know for me and my family growing up, my uncles and my aunts certainly were not fiscal conservatives like my father was, and those were his brothers and sisters. Certainly, the black community is not that simplistic, not that monolithic, and we don't acknowledge that because we're still trying to define blackness, and there's an upsetness when white folks do it, and they do it in some of the Trumpism fashions, that they do it and everybody clutches their pearls and how dare you, and this is a misrepresentation, and many times it is. It's mean-spirited, it's agenda dripping, and it's certainly not most black people's realities. But when stuff like this happens, I see black people doing it. I didn't see not one white person, and that doesn't mean I've seen everything on social media. I didn't see not one white person arguing over or debating over the blackness of the Oak Bluffs collection, or trying to define blackness based on this collection. I didn't. I get upset when other people do it all the time. Black, white, or indifferent. Don't define me. I'm not a definition. I'm not a character on TV. I'm not whatever your stereotype is. I'm not this or that. Just like any other race, there's good, bad, there's everything. There's conservative, there's liberal, there's somewhere in between. There is everything. There are some people who have been financially successful, some that have not. Some has been by their own doing. Some have been by circumstances that they can't control. Everything. And so to argue over a clothing line as just another ridiculous attempt to define blackness in 2025, as we're seeing progress being rolled back, it's just absolutely positively disappointing. This is Marcus Washington with MTC Media.